Hello everyone, welcome to the Curious World of Alice. A few months ago, I was away for a few weeks and had a friend care for my plants. To my pleasant surprise, she had revived my orchid. And I was a first-time orchid owner and just really couldn't grasp what a healthy environment looks like for those types of plants. So I have a newfound appreciation for understanding the thriving environments for certain plant species. So today, I will be sharing 3 tips on how to make your green thumb greener just like your plants. Tip number 1, the planter. The ideal planter will have at least one hole at the bottom, and you simply put it on top of a saucer, which would help contain the excess water. Now, there are tons of planters out there that are beautiful, but that don't have drainage holes. All you need to do is put a smaller planter on the inside that does have holes. I personally like to use cleaned food containers, and I drill the holes myself. The containers don't have to sit properly one inside the other, but you do have to keep in mind that the plant will only be growing in the soil, so if the inside container is smaller or shorter, then the plant will only have the capacity to grow to that size. There are also tons of planters out there that are beautiful and of irregular shape where it's difficult to find a smaller inside container. For those, I like to put a layer of either rocks, or I like to use ceramic pieces that had gone terribly wrong in pottery class, and I break them into smaller pieces just to line them at the bottom of the planter. This will help any extra water to lay at the bottom of the planter so that it will not cause root rotting. Tip number 2, the leaves. A healthy plant will always have new growths and new leaves. And the leaves will be a vibrant, full color. Of course, the growth will depend on the season. In spring and summer, because there's more daylight, the growth will be faster and in more abundance. Unless you live close to the equator, in that case, there isn't much variation in daylight duration between the seasons. The colors on the leaves are also good indicators on how the plant is doing. For example, yellow will mean overwatering, and brown means underwatering. The leaves will also tell you whether it has sufficient sunlight. For example, when the plant looks like it's balding really quickly, that means it's missing sun, and you need to bring it closer to the window. On the contrary, it could also have sunburn spots. That means you have to remove it further away from the window. Typically, when you're reading instructions on specific types of species, it will say direct, indirect, or low light. And just to give you an indication of the type of light, if your window is facing the south, that will normally mean that that's direct sunlight. East and west will have more sunlight, will have stronger sunlight than a window facing north. Any plants that are receiving light from a window facing north is typically receiving indirect sunlight. The leaves will also tell you whether it's receiving enough nutrient. For example, when it's pale and translucent, that means it's time to fertilize it. Tip number 3, the soil. Before watering, if you want to see or if you want to learn how to assess whether there's enough water, you can always pick up the planter and then pour the water in slowly. And you can gauge how heavy it is when it's full of water as opposed to when it's very dry or dry. Or the other method is to put your finger inside the soil. While you're watering, it's always good to pour water in slowly because once it's in the planter, it's nearly impossible to get it out. And when you're pouring it slowly, you could observe the infiltration rate, which means the speed that the water is flowing into the soil. At first, especially if your plant is very thirsty, then the soil will be dry and the infiltration rate will be high. And once it's nearly saturated, or as it increases in its saturation, then the water penetrating into the soil will slow down. By observing the soil, you can also notice when it's time to add more. I like to top up the soil when I see there's a receding line on the planter. Most soils already have fertilizer in it, which is nutrient, and that will help the plant flourish. Occasionally, I will add compost to my plants. Compost is the decomposition of organic waste, and it has been used for as long as humans started farming. And I have 3 bonus tips for you. 1, be patient. When your plant is in distress and you change its environment by adding water, changing its location, it takes at least 1 to several days for it to react. 2, keep at it and don't give up. Plants are extremely resilient, and it actually takes a very long time for it to perish. For example, I have a pothos plant in a tin can, and I didn't realize that the can was rusting, and that plant stayed in there for an entire year, thriving, definitely not in an optimal environment, but it didn't die. I also have some plants that I prefer to keep it in smaller planters to try to keep it from growing bigger, and you will see that if it has the room on the inside planter to grow more roots, it will do that. In this example, you could see that it just tries to do everything it can to get as big as possible, even in a space that doesn't have soil. 3, admire it. By admiring your plants, you will pay attention to it. You will notice the changes. You will give your best effort in order to make it as happy and healthy as possible. It will talk to you, and it will give you plenty of clues for you to know that it's doing well or not so well. Thanks for tuning in. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up, and I would love to hear your gardening tips in the comments below.